Welcome to the Economy Magazine. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares with the news from the global economy. In today's show, we cover the spread of Ebola raises health and financial concerns, and Hamas is unwavering despite Gazan economy's ruin. First, the headlines. The European Commission on Monday announced a series of exceptional measures to help growers hit by a Russian ban on fruit and vegetable imports. The EU's executive arm allocated $170 million to subsidize farmers unable to find alternative markets to replace demand from Russia at short notice. By withdrawing the crops from the market, the EC hopes to prop up low prices brought on by the drop in demand from Russia. The aid measures remain available until November.
The whole idea, if you've just got supply and demand, following the Russian restrictions, there's much more supply on the market. This is a measure aimed at reducing the level of supply so that the prices don't drop below or don't drop to crisis levels.
U.S. stocks surged on Monday and the Nasdaq closed at a 14-year high, supported by homebuilder confidence and hopes for receding tensions in Russia. The Nasdaq ended above 4508, marking the first time since March 31, 2000 that the tech-heavy index closed above 4,500 points. The S&P 500 extended last week's gains, climbing to within 1% of an all-time high. Homebuilder stocks rose after the NAHB Wells Fargo Housing Market Index showed that homebuilder sentiment rose for the third straight month in August. Japan signed a $550 million loan with Costa Rica to build geothermal plants as the country looks towards carbon neutrality. Japan International Cooperation Agency will finance the construction of the three plants to capture steam produced in the volcanic northwestern province of Guanacaste. The plants are expected to have an electrical generation capacity of 55 megawatts and are scheduled to be fully operational by 2020. The loan will cover nearly 60% of the investment required within the plants. More than 90% of Costa Rica's energy comes from renewable sources such as hydroelectric plants and wind farms.
From the point of view of computability between economic growth and the environment, the development of renewable energy is one of the most important challenges, not just for developing countries, but also for developed countries. Costa Rica's energy matrix is a model for the rest of the world.
Bitcoin's price continued its downward spiral, falling to its lowest value since May, weighed down by new regulations and market jitters. The price of Bitcoin dropped nearly 12% to $435.60 from $492.95 on Monday, far below its peak of about $1,150 last year. New regulations by the Department of Financial Services require a bid license for Bitcoin exchanges and companies that manage the virtual currency on behalf of customers. While increased regulation may impede the growth of Bitcoin, concerns about its volatility are the key barrier to its mainstream use. As the Ebola virus spreads, it raises major health and safety concerns across West Africa, but the epidemic could also have far-reaching consequences on the economic front. More in this report.
Already more than 1,000 have died from the Ebola virus, and the epidemic continues to spread in West Africa. Though health and safety are the priority, economic concerns loom too. Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone have already lowered their growth projections. But Nigeria seems to be at the most risk economically. With about 20 million people, Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital, is the most populous city in Africa, leaving a lot of room for the disease to spread.
Most people, especially in Nigeria, that everywhere is always sunny. If somebody should have sweat on his body and I get a contact with the person, I'm aware of the fact that I might get the virus. So everybody now, before entering a bus, we all get into the bus gently. No rushing like the normal Lagos hustle and all.
The first victims of this epidemic have been traders who interact with people from all over, and especially those who sell the meat of wild animals, a popular staple in Nigeria, but also a potential source of the deadly virus.
After the man came from Liberia, he died, and it started affecting us. And now there are no more buyers, so our meat spoils. We throw it away. Some of it we eat. Then the other ones, we throw them off. So it's affecting us very much.
The biggest economic fallout could come from disruptions to the oil and gas industry there. According to Moody's, this epidemic may take a major toll on the local workforce and force foreign companies to evacuate their staff. Nigeria is the largest oil producer on the continent, and a crisis to life such as this may have far-reaching consequences on the economic front.
Ali Khan Sachu, financial and geopolitical analyst and CEO of the East African Financial Portal, joins us on Skype concerning the economic impact of Ebola on West Africa. Mr. Sachu?
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. I understand that Nigeria, Africa's second largest economy, is most concerned about the economic impact of Ebola. Are there any projections for how Ebola might affect the Nigerian economy?
Well, I mean, Nigeria obviously was upgraded recently to be sub-Saharan Africa's biggest economy, ahead of South Africa, $500 billion economy. So far, it's been relatively muted. I think we've had a single-digit deaths. Any death is a bad thing, but it's in the single digits. But obviously, if we see an expansion and infection in the Nigerian economy, it's going to have a massive impact across the African continent because it remains very much the locomotive of sub-Saharan Africa.
Are businesses taking any precautionary measures against the fallout from Ebola? I mean, are there any precautionary measures they can take?
Well, I mean, as far as we all know so far, except for some experimental drugs which were reasonably successful, there is no known cure for Ebola, and that's why, of course, it captures our imagination in such a manner. So far, I think, there isn't any sort of silver bullet that can stop this in its tracks. I think, the risks are the numbers are being massively undercounted. Just gathering data in Africa is a fiendishly complicated exercise. You can imagine what it's like in these parts of Africa. So I think, the risk is that this is being undercounted, as WHO mentioned. The problem is our health services are nothing like yours. They are underfinanced. I mean, you just have to look at some of the photographs. It's pretty worrying. And I think, unless people step up and look to help, and assist, I think, we're in danger of this infection spreading. I don't think we've hit epidemics tend to have a tipping point. I'm not certain we're anywhere near the tipping point yet.
Right. What we said also in the report, though, is that these international companies, specifically in the oil and gas and the energy markets, might be pulling back their staff. How would this affect the local energy market?
Well, I mean, it would have a very big effect. I mean, we've already seen in some of the harder hit countries like Guinea and Sierra Leone, we've seen the mining companies withdraw. We've seen some agricultural companies take a step back. But obviously, if we see this sort of action in Nigeria, bear in mind Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia, the three countries where the epicenter of this epidemic is, are very small in the scheme of things. They total an economic size of about $12 billion, about half the size of Afghanistan, whereas you've got Nigeria, which is half of sub-Saharan Africa. So it's really an impact in Nigeria would be transformative. And it would be a body blow to not only the Nigerian economy, but the African economy. Regarding oil and gas, it's an interesting story in Nigeria. Of course, 2-3 years ago, most of this oil was being uplifted to North America. That's no longer the case. So I think, the oil and gas industry, the dynamics have changed a little, but obviously a very, very big part of Nigeria's economy. 90% of government revenues come from oil.
Okay, well, Mr. Ali Khan Sachu, financial and geopolitical analyst and CEO of the East African Financial Portal, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Gazans have paid a high price for Hamas's strategy of using homes, schools, and factories for arms storage and launching pads. But while Gaza's officials insist on Israel's complete acceptance of their demands before agreeing to a ceasefire, reconstruction of Gaza's economy is delayed indefinitely. Daniel Roth has the story.
Deserted streets and buildings destroyed, Israel's offensive in the Gaza Strip has created a field of ruins. Among the ruins, this old ice cream factory. Its owner says he lost some $25 million. But beyond that, the profitable enterprise had employed more than 400 people before this round of violence.
Around 400 to 450 employees worked in this factory. Now they have lost their jobs. Since the factory was demolished, these workers are now unemployed.
Unemployment was already hovering around 40%. Now, with some 500 businesses destroyed under fire, unemployment could reach half the population of the Palestinian territory.
Targeting the factories affects negatively the Palestinian economy. This will increase unemployment, so it may be more than 50% unemployment. More than 30,000 workers will be unemployed after the factories were destroyed. Before the war, we used to talk about 41% unemployment. There were 180,000 unemployed people in Gaza, but now there will be 210,000 people unemployed. This will cause an increase in poverty from 38% to 60%.
Even companies that have not been directly hit are finding it challenging to find footing, especially since the only power plant in the enclave was damaged by Israeli military strikes. Now, Gaza's economy, which grew 7% in 2012 and 3% in 2013, could find itself in recession this year, making life in Gaza that much harder amid the violence and the dead.
And we delve now into the international media for a look at some other reports we thought worthy of mentioning in Media Watch. Daniel Roth, thanks for joining us.
How's it going?
Good. So I understand we have something from the New York Times.
Yes,
yeah?
The New York Times, the paper of note. They have this really interesting piece about what people call the collaborative economy, the sharing economy, the gig economy. There's endless names. One of the reasons for this is because it's fairly new, actually, and facilitated mostly by the internet. Basically, it talks about people who, in today's economy, post-crash of 2008, have to find one-time gigs. People aren't finding full-time work for sure.
Right.
Almost 10 million people were out of work in the U.S. in July.
Yeah.
People are having trouble finding part-time work, but that's where most of the work is going to. There's reports from Canada, the U.S., all over the Western world talking about the part-time work economy. But now there's something a little less than 20 million people in the U.S. working in this gig economy. It's not just internet-based, but overall sort of like one-time contract work.
What kind of companies are we talking, or what kind of work?
So we're talking about companies like Uber and Lyft that allow you to use your car to be essentially a taxi driver. Right. Talking about TaskRabbit, where you can sign up to do tasks for people, to be someone's personal assistant, to fix someone's, sprinkler system, whatever it is. It's online communities that are being used to connect people who need things and people who want things. And the article actually delves into the danger of this, and the need to regulate it is one of the points that they come to.
The danger of this?
There's no worker protection. So, for example, Uber and Lyft just dropped the cost of certain kinds of fares. Mm-hmm. So they didn't have to deal with workers. They don't have workers per se.
Right.
They have contract people who take contracts for them.
Right.
They essentially act as facilitators, connectors, not employers. So they don't have any real responsibility to give benefits, though some of them notably are connecting with the freelancers union in the U.S., things like that.
Well, this is interesting because this is actually one of the other ways in which the internet age, so to speak, has put so much more power in the hands of the people, right?
Right. And actually, so this brings us to the next story. In Truth Out, they're talking about the internet, which in the States, it's very hard. They actually are 31st on a recent count in the world in terms of speed of internet and ease of internet. And this is talking about the internet ought to be a utility, like water, like education, in some countries, education.
In some countries, that's what you're going to say, yeah.
But, it's talking about the fact that nowadays, because of the economy, because of the way people access information, the internet is a public library, it's a water system, it's not cable TV. It's how we connect, it's how we communicate, it's something that everyone needs. So governments ought to be investing in it in that way and not just leaving it to private companies to create these networks, which essentially keeps some people out.
Wow, okay. And what are these people we're talking about? Obviously, we're talking about people in the developing world, so to speak.
Yeah, well, certainly in the developing world, we're talking about people who essentially can't afford it. You're talking about people also in the developed world and also in the developing world who just don't have access because it's not being provided by democratic powers, it's being provided by corporate powers.
Which is one of the reasons why Mark Zuckerberg is one of the people who is involved in trying to get the internet to more people, correct?
Right. Also, Google, a lot of the big internet companies are interested. It's a double-edged sword, of course. They're interested for a number of reasons, but they're interested in getting the internet out to people so people have access to their products and to communication with the world.
Okay, well, we'll see how that happens and how that goes. Thanks, Daniel Roth, for enlightening us on this subject of internet and who doesn't have it, basically. That's a wrap for us at The Economy Magazine, your daily source for economic and financial reports at I-24 News. I'm Benjamin Chong Alfares. Follow me on Twitter at Chong Alfares and send us your comments via the feedback link at the bottom of our page. Join us again tomorrow.